Nir, welcome
Thank you.
to Raw. Thanks for coming in. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well.
So I read a little bit about you in the last few days and about transpersonal therapy, and I discovered that there is actually a therapeutic approach that matches what it is I've been saying for a long time, which is that um, I've been in psychotherapy for 20 years, and I'm always trying to explain it to my therapist, whom I love, but who's very old school, Freudian French, and that I kind of feel like I'm turning around this kind of ego all the time, the self, the ego, the story, the narrative, the identification, and on the side, I have this kind of parallel world where I discovered yoga and meditation and psychedelics. Not yet. I read it's part of transpersonal. It's a possibility, and that I felt that the kind of conventional therapy was missing that part, which was a huge factor in my journey of, I don't like the word healing because it's a bit too new agey. But and then I read transpersonal therapy. It takes it all into consideration. It does the old school kind of talk therapy, and then you do the whole like spiritual, mindful, yeah, transcendental aspects of it. So tell me about your journey. How did you come to this practice, to this kind of therapy? What was
Yeah.
your story? And then we can delve a little bit more into your area of interest, which is specifically revolving around psychedelics.
Yeah. My journey with the mental health started with psychedelic experiences and trance parties. And I still have a very good friend who had a serious psychedelic crisis.
Mm.
And this sort of, I would say, initiated me into what a mental breakdown, psychotic breakdown looks like, what sort of support the mental health system has to offer in such situations. And it left obviously a very, very strong impression on me. And then I went to a completely different direction. My bachelor's is in marine biology. And
That's
to,
lovely.
yeah,
How does one leave marine biology?
yeah, but it was pretty easy. I gotta say, it was pretty easy. Um, so towards the end of the bachelor's, I realized that I'm not into counting plankton in the lab, and that it's probably not going to be my career. Although I wasn't planning on counting plankton, I was planning to swim with whales, but it's a different story. But I realized I'm not going to work as a marine biologist, and I started thinking, okay, so what am I going to do? And then Stanislav Grof came to Israel. Stanislav Grof is a psychiatrist. Today he's 92, I think. And he is one of the founders of transpersonal psychology and psychedelic psychotherapy. And he came to Israel to give a series of seminars and lectures. And I realized that the institute that invited him is an institute that has a psychotherapeutic method that they teach called Hakomi. It's called the Hakomi method. It's a mindfulness-based psychotherapy. So I did a 3-year training in the Hakomi Institute. And then I started taking supervision and do basically my practicum under the European Transpersonal Association. So today I'm certified under the European Transpersonal Association, since the Hakomi method is a transpersonal method. Yeah, the transpersonal psychology is a very, very wide field. There is no really one transpersonal methodology. Yeah, it's not like a psychoanalysis or a Jungian analysis. It's not like a methodology. It's more like a school of thought, a theoretical paradigm, something very wide that contains within it many influences from many places around the world, many traditions, many spiritual schools, etc. So obviously my work is very much influenced by the Hakomi method, which brings principles from Taoistic wisdom and the Buddhistic traditions and more modern science-based mindfulness practice. And personally, what really influenced me spiritually are my psychedelic experiences. And I got an invitation to facilitate a safe space in a trance festival in 2016. And me and my friend Shir, we gathered some of our...
Trans music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, me and my friend Shir gathered our friends around us that had psychedelic experiences and were within the therapy world one way or another. And we kind of held this safe space for 5 days, and we basically just jumped into the water of what today I've been doing for the last almost a decade. So this was my first step into the psychedelic harm reduction world.
So, for people who are not going to trance parties and haven't taken, mind-altering drugs, tell us a little bit about the scene in Israel. It's still illegal. It's an illegal. Those are illegal substances,
Yeah.
and yet a huge percentage of the Israeli kind of younger generation has had experience with these substances. We can talk a little bit, and you can tell me more about the different substances. We're talking about MDMA, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca. These are all kind of mind-altering psychedelic drugs. What is the history of these drugs in Israel? How has it changed in the past few years since there have started being some clinical trials using them in therapeutic settings? And why do you think these are so popular in Israel?
I think psychedelic experiences, non-ordinary states, they have roots like way, way, way back. Yeah, like I think it goes all the way back to Mount Sinai probably. But if we're talking more recent times, I think there was a huge rise of the prevalence of psychedelic experiences when the electronic music age kind of started booming, which is like very late 80s, early 90s. Trance music and psychedelic trance is something that Israelis contributed hugely to the development of, globally. Yeah, if you go to probably any large trance festival today has numerous Israeli DJs. Yeah? And even if not, the music that is played there is influenced by music that was made by Israelis, 100%. So Goa trance was developing largely with the development of Israeli trance culture. Yeah, it kind of happened simultaneously. And I think one of the reasons that Israelis got so caught up in this is because psychedelic trance allows celebration of freedom. Yeah, the values of the trans culture, we say plur, peace, love, unity, and respect. Being able to celebrate life, to be free, to be equal, to be loving to whoever, to be outside of societal norms, to be outside of the legal framework of what's allowed and what's not allowed. I think it was very, very, and still is very, very charming for people. And I think that there is also something with us lacking more modern spiritual tradition we can identify with. Yeah, I mean, for me, trance festivals are sort of my spiritual practice. Yeah, they're my spiritual setting more than a practice. Yeah, but that's the setting where I experienced most of my profound spiritual experiences.
Does it have to go along, like, does trance have to go along with mind-altering
No,
drugs?
no,
Or
no,
can you kind of get into a state of spirituality just by
you
virtue of
absolutely
the
can. It happened
of
to
the
me
music?
many times, many times. I can say that I cannot say that it would have been the same if I wouldn't take psychedelics in the dance floor initially. Because today I can reconnect to psychedelic experiences or to something that my body already remembers and knows just because I had this experience before. But there are many, many people who are not using psychedelics in the dance floor and still have very profound experiences. I mean, dance as a spiritual practice is a very, very, very ancient practice, probably more ancient than the use of plants to alter your mind. And for sure, to a large extent, they developed simultaneously. So I think that there is something in this celebration of freedom and in this togetherness and in this ability to have a modern spiritual ritual, a tribal experience. I think we're lacking this. Yeah? And then there's a lot of literature about the importance of rites of passage, about the initiatory rites for people, for us as we grow up and develop, whether that's a bar mitzvah. Originally, it's an initiation rite. A wedding is an initiation rite. Birth. And all the ceremonies that traditionally are held around this are an important part of our psychological, spiritual development. And as secular society, people are left sort of in the dark with their deeply embedded will to go through a ceremony, through a ritual, through a developmental psychospiritual process. So I think trance raves are a very good setting and container for us to have these experiences.
So you had been doing this for a while, before or, alongside this kind of booming interest in psychedelics, and a lot of people are taking psychedelics, and so you started creating these safe spaces for people who are at these raves and who might take these drugs and might not be prepared for it and might react to them in kind of different ways. And so that's what you had been doing, basically when October 7th happened. And October 7th, one of the major events was the Nova Festival, which was one of these trans rites of passage for mostly young people, but also people of all ages, to kind of come together and dance, and in many situations take these drugs with a desire to have these kind of mind-altering experiences where some people say they transcend their sense of self, they connect with something larger, they have spiritual experience, they connect with the people around them, they feel a deep sense of love, of kind of like timelessness or time changing. And then in the midst of having, sometimes for the first time, sometimes with more experience, taken these psychedelic drugs, the massacre started happening. So tell me about that day for you. Where were you? And, what are the things that kind of like immediately you started thinking about, or what did you go through as you started understanding what happened, particularly at the Nova Festival?
Yeah. So I woke up on October 7th in Tenerife. It was 9 a.m., 11 a.m. Israel time. So 5 hours, 4.5 hours into the war. And I had a very casual phone call to my partner, Guy Simon, who's my partner in the psychotherapy center that we are directing together. And I said, hey, what's up? And he said, what's up? A war. And I'm like, what? He's like, you don't know. I'm like, no. He's like, okay, so open the news and talk later. And I opened the news, and the first phone call I did was to Igal Tartakovsky, who is my partner in Safe Shore, the psychedelic harm reduction project that we're holding. We had a team of 20 volunteers in Reim the night before. Same location where the Nova Rave happened. There was another party the night before, and we had 20 volunteers there. And Eagle said that everyone are safe. And then he said that Anashim Tovim, who is a sort of a sister project to us, they're doing the same work, more with youth, that they are there in this party. So I called,
in Nova.
Yeah. So I called Moshe Elad, who is one of the directors of Anashim Tovim, and he actually answered from his hiding place. I mean, I was shocked, and I said, I'm here if there's anything I can do to help. And obviously, I mean, what can I do to help? Nobody knew anything. And I remember, I think it was maybe 1 hour after I woke up, I remember I'm sitting outside in this house in Tenerife, and I'm holding my head, and I'm telling Yigal, I can't believe it. I think there's like 10 to 20 people dead in this party. Yeah? And we were like horrified. We were like not comprehending what we're saying. And then the news kept on coming. We gathered forces, 8 people from the therapeutic psychedelic community, and on the very same day we uploaded a list of clinicians that are psychedelic friendly. We later kind of coined the term psychedelic informed therapist, and we uploaded this list, and it was spread all over the country. And from the very same day, basically worked, I mean, not 24 hours a day, but probably 20 hours a day, every day to basically coordinate between the thousands of applications that we got from the survivors of the different parties, not only the Nova Rave, also the Midburn Prep weekend that took place, and the SIDAC event that happened, and there was also a small party in Zikim on the beach. So we basically said that anyone that was in one of these parties can turn to us. Very quickly, most of the survivors turned to us to support, because obviously they wanted psychedelic-informed therapists to talk to. Yeah.
Of those 3,000, how many would you say had taken psychedelics? You know,
I mean, our estimation is around 2/3. In a scientific quantitative project that our NGO Safe Heart is conducting, it was showed that 67 or 8% declared taking some substance, including cannabis and alcohol.
so what? Just to get some clarification, what are the most kind of prevalent substances?
I mean, alcohol and cannabis, obviously, are the most prevalent substances. I was a co-researcher in a study that we conducted together with the Ministry of Health before October 7th about patterns of use of psychedelics in nature parties, in trance raves in Israel. And we saw that cannabis and alcohol were leading, and then it was MDMA, and then LSD. In this study, it was between 70 and 80% for both LSD and MDMA for people to say, at least once in my life I took this substance in a trance rave. I'm not sure exactly what were what's the data for the Nova Rave, and I think in a sense we will never know. But LSD and MDMA are big players, in the dance floor, also in the Nova Rave.
For the listeners who are not familiar with it, what are the differences?
So MDMA generates or awakens empathy. So it's like a heart opener. It creates an experience where you want to feel intimacy. You're usually feeling comfortable to speak and to share your heart openly. It generates a sensation of trust, something that can also be, I would say, a bit fake. Like you might feel like you can trust people that you cannot really trust, but it makes you very, very loving and empathic, and usually wanting touch and intimacy, and it is used in research to check the efficacy for the treatment of PTSD, because when you take MDMA, it expands what is called the window of tolerance. Mm-hmm. Because when we are dealing with traumatic experiences, we might go outside our own personal window of tolerance. So maybe I had a traumatic experience in my childhood, and every time I try to be in touch with this experience, even after 10, 15 years of psychotherapy, I am getting out of the window of tolerance in the sense of I am confronting emotions, physical sensations, mental activity to an extent that I cannot stay, first of all, in touch with my therapist, and I cannot process, I cannot integrate my internal experience. It's too much for me to experience. Yeah, I'm reliving to a certain extent the traumatic experience, and I'm getting outside of the window of tolerance, which can happen to the hyperactivity. So hyperactivity means I'm going to have a panic attack, I'm going to shake, I'm going to cry a lot. Yeah, I'm going to be in a very activated sensory activity. Yeah, my nervous system is going to be hyperactivated. And the other side of the window of tolerance is the hypoactivity, which can be someone dissociating, stopping to respond, not hearing you, becoming very tired very quickly. Yeah, maybe even fainting or like stopping to respond completely. So MDMA expand temporarily our window of tolerance, and it allows us to be in touch with previous traumatic experience without getting outside of the window of tolerance, which helps us stay in touch with the two therapists that are sitting with me in the room and helping me integrate this experience. And the LSD is a classic psychedelic, and it's what's originally called an hallucinogen. Yeah, so it is awakening a much more, I would say, chaotic and intense mental cognitive activity. It has a lot to do with transpersonal experiences, with like experiencing our usual everyday ego not necessarily completely dissolving, but like expanding or changing. So people on LSD can have an experience of being one with nature, being one with their romantic partner, sometimes experiences of seeing nature and even inanimate objects as alive, like seeing matter as something that is more profound than what we usually experience it to be, enjoying music in a completely different level than what we can enjoy without LSD, seeing complex visual patterns, whether we call it hallucinations or revelations or visions.
So Nova is, happens October 7th. A lot of people are on these drugs, which, as you say, each of them does quite different things.
Yeah.
What was your first kind of gut instinct that these drugs would be in some way protective of these people's psyche as they go through their traumas and later their post-trauma? Or did you feel like a great fear that people on these drugs would that it would even like exacerbate the already horrific trauma that they were going through?
So my first intuition, I mean, I can barely call it intuition. I was just horrified to think that people are now under psychedelics experiencing this. I was just horrified and shocked and thinking this is probably the worst thing that can happen. I was very quickly afraid for the people who took ketamine, which is a dissociative drug that makes it very hard for you to function coordination-wise and orient yourself in space and use your body's energy. Yeah, it's a dissociative drug, so it creates like a gap between the body and the psyche. Yeah, and obviously one of the things you want to do in such situation is be very sharp and probably run. And I was very worried about the people who took ketamine, which is used very extensively these days in parties. When I grew up, it wasn't that prevalent, but today it's like used very extensively. So I was thinking about the people who took ketamine, and we later really heard from people who took ketamine that it was very hard to get yourself together and function. Some people really needed physical help from other people to move themselves to safety. And it's, I would say, possible to really distinguish between people's own personal freeze, fight, or flight response to the traumatic event and the way they personally experience the specific psychedelic in the specific dose and timing that they took it. Yeah, so we're talking about a very, very infinitely complex environment that it's very hard or impossible to gather real accurate data about the meanings of all of this.
Right, because you're not in a clinical setting where
You're
you
not in
give
a
the
clinic.
same dose to the same people
Yeah.
at the same time, and you
Yeah.
see how different people react based
Yeah.
on their, weight and whatever they've eaten.
Yeah, and they don't even know if they drank 3 glasses of whiskey before they took the drop of LSD or one. They have no idea. Yeah, so just one example. But some people bought a substance and they actually got a different substance than what they thought they're getting. Some people just drank from a shared bottle. They have no idea what dose they took. Yeah, some people mix different substances, which like we cannot really know what the implications of it on each individual brain, mixing different substances, etc. So I think it's very, very important to approach this situation and this event with caution and not to jump into conclusions, which some people feel free to do to create fancy publications. From what we see in initial findings from the series of phenomenological interviews that Guy, my partner, conducted with Nova survivors, people who were under the influence of psychedelics during the attack, approximately 50% of them under the influence of LSD. And we see that most people said that the psychedelic that they took helped them, first of all, save themselves or others. More than 70% of the people said that it helped them save themselves or others. And a similar number, above 70%, maybe it was even above 80%, they said it also helped them cope with fear, terror, and helplessness. And these findings were surprising to us very much. But I would say that it's very, very, very important to remember that this is their own subjective experience about what happened. So we are fully supportive and happy for people that they feel that everything they did was the right thing to do. Because everyone who got out alive did everything right, in a sense. In a sense. And it does not mean that psychedelics help to cope with the traumatic event, or if a traumatic event is happening in the future, you want to be under the influence of psychedelics. It just means that everyone that got out of alive feel that everything, every single step, if they jumped right or left, obviously the psychedelic influenced it in a sense. Yeah, you take a psychedelic, it influences everything you see, think, hear. So your decision to jump right and not left was influenced also by the psychedelic. And if I got home, I'm happy I took the psychedelic because I'm home. Yeah. So we are trying to really approach this data with caution and with remembering that approximately 400 people were murdered. It's around 400 people that were murdered in all the 3 events in the south. In the Nova alone, it was, I think, 384, if I remember correctly. At least 2/3 of 384 people who were under the influence and did not survive. Yeah. And we will never know what their experience was. We will never know what was the role of psychedelics in their experience. And this obviously ultimately influences the total pool of participants.
So, as a therapist, as a researcher, and as someone who has taken and assists people in taking psychedelics, what do you kind of advise the kind of average person who says, I have an interest, I don't know, where to start. Is it safe? Is it not safe? How do you talk about it? Taking into consideration that it's illegal and that we're here,
Yeah.
recording this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, what would you tell the kind of like average person?
Okay. So I think the maybe one take home message about psychedelics for me is sense of safety. I mean, one should do everything to feel as safe as possible. And that sometimes is not such an easy task to feel safe, especially for people who are just in their everyday life, not feeling safe for many reasons. And I mean, for now, we're still in a war. So our collective sense of safety is severely wounded. So there are collective aspects of sense of safety that we sadly cannot influence or change. And there's more personal ones. And we can really see, I'm also a co-researcher together with a guy in a research project about challenging psychedelic experiences. So we interviewed 48 people from around the world who had a challenging psychedelic experience. And we can really see that people's sense of safety before, during, and after can really determine if the psychedelic experience stays a challenging experience or really becomes a traumatic experience. Yeah? And when I mean a traumatic psychedelic experience, I mean an experience that was way too much for the nervous system, for the person to go through, whether it's emotionally, cognitively, sensory, but it was too much. And this can leave sometimes prolonged anxiety disorders. Yeah, so panic attacks, flashbacks, tinnitus, increased heart rate, and many other anxiety-related symptoms. So even if you had a challenging experience, you didn't take care of what is called the set and setting, and you had, I mean, you can have a challenging experience even if you take very good care of the set and setting. But even if you didn't take care of the set and setting and you had a really horrible experience, your sense of safety afterwards can still have a tremendous effect on how you're going to process this experience and probably influence the extent of time that you're going to deal with the prolonged symptoms. Because what's going to happen probably is that things that I'm experiencing but not talking about or not bringing to my conscious awareness are going to come up to my conscious awareness, and they're going to come up with like pretty strong forces sometimes. So it's like feeling safe is also kind of involved with being in touch with the things I don't want to touch. Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, even if I'm in psychotherapy and I'm trying to do this shadow work with myself, sometimes I'll still be surprised and have this like memories coming up or like challenging emotional experience coming up. But if I at least tried to be in touch with the more challenging aspects of my psyche without psychedelics, I will already probably be better when these things, I will be reconfronted with these things under the influence of psychedelics. Yeah.
To what extent do you see kind of people in the IDF, in the military, experimenting with these substances?
I mean, it's happening. It's just a fact that people are using psychedelics when they're in their military service, like when they're 18 to 21. And obviously, many of their recruitment soldiers have experienced psychedelics since they were released. And I mean, it's just a part of Israeli society, this intersection between psychedelic experiences and combat experiences. not really sure what to say about it besides the fact that there is a huge complexity in it, and there is a lot of splits that one needs to do in order to hold both realities. I think I guess some people can integrate all of this, and some people are probably living in a very serious split because of these two very meaningful dimensions of their life that are so different and so hard to bring together into my own singular lived experience, in a sense.
Where do you think psychedelics are headed from a kind of national point of view, implementation in clinics? Where do you see this heading? Do you think it's going to be this kind of like huge, game changer that so many are talking about? If so, which of the substances do you think are going to have the biggest effect, and on what?
I want psychedelics to be researched thoroughly and to be made accessible for people who need it. I think psychedelics can help depression in the right set and setting. I think psychedelics can help PTSD in the right set and setting. But I also see how when big money is getting involved, that there is all this, I don't know what sort of factors that are taken into considerations, and things that are, we call it, I heard one woman say it, and I really love that she said it in a conference. She called it epistemological violence. That we are, in the way we study things, in the way we approach knowledge, we hurt the very thing that we're trying to study. And our wish to put these very complex human experiences into the very, very narrow medical, bureaucratical framework, it's not the direction that I believe in. I think that, as a fact, more than 99% of psychedelic experiences are happening in a non-controlled setting. Yeah? Like in the US alone, in the 2022 National Drug Survey, in the US alone, there were 48 million people above the age of 18 who had at least one psychedelic experience with an hallucinogen. It's not even including MDMA. Okay, so 48 million people in the US alone that took, I guess, classic psychedelics like hallucinogens. Yeah.
So that's mushrooms and
mushrooms,
LSD.
DMT, LSD, ayahuasca, like one of the ingredients is DMT, mescaline. And I couldn't get to an exact number, but it's in the tens of thousands, the number of people that ever had a psychedelic experience in a clinical trial, including the 50s and 60s in Czechoslovakia and whatnot. Yeah? So more than 99% of the people have their psychedelic experience in a non-controlled setting. And I think it will always, always stay like that, because it's not something that is possible to enforce. I mean, it's plants. They're growing everywhere. I think that it's definitely going to keep growing, psychedelic-assisted therapy. And some companies are definitely going to make many millions of dollars from this field. I am not sure that this is very cost effective. I think that there is more healing and improvement in the well-being of people that can happen if we learn how to hold, first of all, change the regulatory legal status of these substances, and then learn how to hold safe communal group settings for this.
For a country where everybody pretty much at the age of 18 goes to the army, and after this war and after previous wars, so many experience PTSD. Do you think that psychedelics assisted therapy is going to have a profound effect on their ability to heal PTSD?
I don't know. I know that there is one study with combat soldiers who suffer from PTSD in a group setting with MDMA. It is led by a psychologist called Ronen Sidi, and that seemed like a very interesting therapeutic process. And I read some of his writings, and he seemed to approach it in a beautiful way, as I see it. So I think, again, it's more about how we use these substances and the setting we hold these experiences in, and the intention we have for the people, and the way we perceive what healing is, and the psychotherapeutic methodologies that are embedded in these processes, rather than MDMA can help. Like, I think, as I said before, I think it's like really, really slippery slope, these like jumping into quick conclusions and assumptions about what these substances can do.
I want to talk a little bit about the harm reduction program that you run. What does that mean? How do you provide harm reduction when someone is in a bad trip? Or, what do you advise to people if they have a friend or they know someone who's having a difficult time with psychedelics?
So our project is called Safe Shore, Chof Mivtachim in Hebrew, and I lead it with Yigal Tartakovsky, and we basically have a team of approximately 200 volunteers that we selected out of approximately or more than 1,000 people that came to one of our workshops in the last 7 years. So in the coming March, we're going to have our 40th Holding Space workshop, which is a 2-day workshop that we bring into it a lot of knowledge and practices that are supportive when people are in a distress, in a non-ordinary state. Yeah, actually we see it as a sort of a emotional first aid training, even without anything to do with psychedelics, but we bring a lot of knowledge and emphasis about what's the important nuances of someone being in a non-ordinary state and all the risks of the different psychedelics, etc. So we have this 2-day training that people can come to even if they don't want to volunteer. But some of the people that are coming to this workshop want to volunteer afterwards. So we have this pool of 200 people that are active volunteers, and we are getting phone calls from productions of trans parties. And we have like 5, 6, 7, probably more by now, productions that we regularly work with. And then we send a team of volunteers, between 10 and 20 people. And we get there, the production is taking care of a safe space, the physical safe space for us. And then we work in shifts. And in a shift, we have like 4 to 7 people, half male, half female, usually half clinicians, half not. So even people with therapeutic experience are coming to this 2-day workshop and then volunteer in the field. And anyone can turn to us in any sort of emotional, mental distress, whether they took psychedelics or not. And when someone is coming, we're trying to very slowly and gently ask, how can we help? In different ways, some people need a place to rest, some people need a hug, some people need to talk to someone for a few hours, some people need someone to go to the medics with them.
Do you find that after Nova, people are more hesitant to take psychedelics because they're afraid of what might happen if they are, in an altered state of mind, or is it as popular as ever?
I mean, I heard it from many people that since the war started, they're not taking psychedelics. And I also know that many people are taking psychedelics. So I don't know. I mean, I guess there's from both. Some people stop, some people don't. Some people use psychedelics to dissociate and get away. Some people understand that if they will take psychedelics, they will not be able to dissociate and get away, and that they will be confronted with everything that they don't want to be confronted with. So it's a really personal thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Anouk.
Thank you for having me and for inviting me. Thank you.